For this next video about why I divorced my ex-husband, by the way, he agreed to the divorce. He didn't want to work on the stuff. So he agreed to it because he didn't want to work on the things. And after we divorced, he admitted that he was full of unresolved resentments that he never expressed to me. Okay? And that's because of his mom. I'm going to blame his upbringing and the fact that he didn't want to work on stuff. So his mom to this day is a woman who's like, well, okay, that was that. We're going to move on. We don't do feelings. We're going to move on. And that comes a lot from, like, you know, I think a lot of people grew up in families like that where, like, especially during the Depression and on the farm. Like, my ex-husband's family both come from well-to-do farmers, but they worked super fucking hard, and life was hard during the Depression, and there were a lot of kids on both sides, or some kids, and there was no time for feelings. You know, you had to work really hard. You had to be really frugal, if you know anything about the Depression, and there was no time for feelings. And I also suspect that there was some alcoholism or domestic violence in the grandparents. And the reason I suspect that is because my in-laws never argued. My ex-husband told me I never saw my parents argue. And so, and of course, they did argue. In fact, they almost got divorced once. They had a lot of issues, which we found out about later, but they kept it hidden from the kids because they didn't want the kids to see them argue, because they thought disagreements were bad. Anger is bad. We don't do anger. In fact, we don't do feelings. I remember, and bless their hearts, like his grandmas were like these super sweet old ladies. But I remember one time my grandmother-in-law, like my ex-husband's grandma, was over, and my kids were toddlers, and they were just being toddlers, like noisy at the dinner table. I think they were 1.5 and 3 or something like that, or 2 and 3.5. And they were just being kids. And I remember she shook her head and she goes, "Kid, that's just a lot of racket. We never let our kids talk like that." Because they repressed them. That's what I want to say. They were repressed. And my ex-husband was severely suppressed. He's a very sensitive soul. He's a very kind soul. He's not mean. He's not nasty. He's not like the guys in the comments. He doesn't talk like that at all. He's not nasty like the guys in the comments. He doesn't hate women. However, he grew up so emotionally repressed that he didn't even know how he felt a lot of the time. And even when he was angry, he didn't know he was angry. That's how repressed he was. But he acted angry. And so this took me a really long time to figure out, like, you seem really angry. One time I did say, "You seem kind of angry." I was trying to show compassion for the situation he was in. And he goes, "I'm not angry." And he believed it. And after we got divorced and he read my book, The Fuck List, he said, "I didn't realize how many resentments I had against you and how many of your needs you didn't meet." And that was the only vulnerability he ever showed me. That's the only vulnerability he ever showed me. Sure, he made sure I had flowers for Mother's Day and that the kids were respectful to mom. And, you know, he fixed, like, if I said, "Can you check this on my card? Can you do this home project?" He would do all that. But emotionally, he was avoidant and stonewalled, and he didn't know how he felt. And that's why I divorced him. And that's why I want to tell you, it's a toxic thing. He wasn't hitting me. He wasn't cheating on me. He wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't running off or gambling, but he was stonewalling. And a relationship is all about how we feel and how we interact and how we care about each other. And this is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. And anybody who's going to leave a negative comment on this video or give me any contempt on this video is going to be blocked. Okay? I'm going to make this a public video because I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to share, and I will not deal with any contempt in the comments on this video. You will be blocked. If you leave a contemptuous comment, you will just be blocked. So anyway, I could, and he wouldn't tell me what he was resentful of. Again, my entire marriage, he wouldn't talk about anything. Okay, even when I asked. And I would ask nicely. Hey, I would like this, or can we do this, or why don't you like this? Well, I don't know, that's just how I am. Anything around emotions made him very uncomfortable, but he would say, Shahrazad, I love listening to you talk. You helped me, bring me in touch with my feelings. So it wasn't like he was hating on me all the time. And he was very emotional also with the kids. I'm telling you, he's a sensitive person, and his parents shut him down. And sometimes when people are shut down like that, they don't want to look at anything because it's too scary. So when I wanted to talk about things, he didn't want to talk about things. And the last 3 years of our marriage, we were actually very close, but the anger was still there, and it would come out in the bedroom. The anger would come out in the bedroom. He didn't hit me, but he withheld. Okay? And if you want to know more about that, you read my book, The Fuck List. I'm not going to go into it here. And I don't think he knew that he withheld. One time while we were having sex, I will share this part, I told him that I loved him, and he got angry. Why are you saying that? Now, he was that way because of his parents. However, he could have chosen to do something about it. And I have talked to many men who said, I did not nurture the relationship. I didn't pay attention to her feelings. And I learned. When she left me, I learned. And that's what I want you guys to learn from this. If you're in a relationship with someone who's avoidant, it would make sense that you're unhappy. You would need another avoidant person or a people pleaser to put up with it. And for a long time, I was a people pleaser. I'm like, well, this is how things are. Or maybe I can change them. Maybe I can learn to put up with this. Maybe if I was just a better wife. The last 3 years of our marriage, I was a huge fucking people pleaser. And I was like, if I could just be a better wife, he wouldn't hate me so much. He wouldn't be so resentful. And I didn't know why he was resentful. He wouldn't tell me. So after our divorce, I'm still curious. I have one hypothesis, which I will get into in a moment. But after our divorce, I asked him a couple times, would you, and our divorce was very civil. There was no arguing or fighting like it was. We even hugged each other after we went to the divorce thing to file, after we had to go and both sign our papers. And when we left, we gave each other a hug. And, and then when he met the woman that he then is married to now, he was asking me for advice on dating. And I met her and I told her what a great guy he was. And she really liked that. So I'm just saying, there's no anger or bitterness. There was no custody battle. We didn't do a custody thing. We had one child still at home, and that child got to decide how to come and go. We didn't argue about money. We just split everything. Like, I'm not a fighter. I'm not a bitch like some of you. These guys think that I'm a bitch because I divorced him. But I did ask him, I'm like, okay, time has gone by. He's remarried. Let me ask him, why, what were those resentments? Do you want to tell me? I'm here to listen. You can email me. You can text me. We can have a phone call. What were your resentments? Silence. One time I did when we were talking on the phone about something with the kids. I'm like, so, like, what were all those resentments you had against me? Oh, honey, I've moved on. I've moved on. Like his mom, like, we just moved on. When I asked him, like, yeah, oh, honey, I've moved on. I don't want to talk about that. And that's how he thought about his childhood. People think, like, I've moved on. That was my childhood. That was then. Or I don't want to deal with this. Like, no, I don't want to deal with the feeling stuff. No. But the thing is, if you don't even know that you're angry, that's a huge problem because it's going to come out passive aggressively and you're hurting yourself by holding in all that anger. I think the thing he was angry at was because I wasn't working. Because, see, when he married me, he thought, okay, she has her bachelor's in computer science, and then later I got my MBA, and she's going to work because his mom worked, okay? She had her master's degree and she worked. She got it while the kids were all little because she got married pretty young. And she worked. And he always wanted me to work. So it's a myth that men don't want women to work. That's a myth. All these guys going like, men don't care what women do for work. Yes, they do. A lot of men do care what women do for work. Besides the fact that most men can't even support a woman. You know, you need the woman to work, but a lot of men want the woman to work. I was married to a guy like that, so don't give me that. But after I had my daughter, I went back to work part-time, and he was fine with that. And then they laid me off. And right thereafter, I got pregnant accidentally with the second child, who is like the love of my life. Sometimes accidental pregnancies are the best. And then I decided I didn't want to go back to work because the child care for 2 kids would have been so expensive. I didn't want to abandon my kids to child care, and I wanted to nurse them, and I wanted to keep working part-time. But I could never find a part-time professional job. They didn't exist in the 90s, and they still don't exist today. You want to be an accountant, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a programmer, you want to be a professional woman, it's full-time or nothing, to this day. So I did some various part-time things here and there, but basically I was home with the kids, and he hated that. And I think he hated me for it, but he didn't ever come to me and go, Sharzad, we need to have a discussion. I don't really like this. He didn't have the skill set because he never saw his parents do it. He had no practice in it. He didn't want to do it. And so he just harbored these resentments. That's what I think. I think he resented me for that. Because everything else, I gave him sex when he wanted, except like after year 11, I was like so turned off. I'm like, I'm tired of you groping me for sex and just sticking it in. Like, I'm going to start sleeping with the kids because the sex was so bad. He didn't ever want to go out with me. I was tired of being turned down for going out. And I was asking for sex that was a little bit more intimate, a little bit more oral on me here and there, and then he just started resenting me so much. He didn't want to do any of it. He was stonewalling and he was avoidant. That's what he was. And he wasn't like, hey, we need to talk about this. Hey, we need to address this. I had no idea what was happening until I lost my sex drive and I went to the therapist. But there's a long thing. And then by year 11, I was so angry with him too that I didn't give a shit anymore about being frugal with the money. I lost interest in the relationship, but it took a long time for me to lose interest in the relationship. And I started fantasizing about sex with women because I didn't want to cheat on him, and I didn't. I didn't cheat on him. I did have one cheating event in my whole life, ever, which is in my book. I think it's in my book. But it was never while I was married. Okay, I didn't cheat on him while I was married, so let me put it that way. Okay, but the problem for me was that I changed over the years. So I knew what he was like, I knew his limitations, okay? I knew that the sex was bad, and I knew that he wasn't interested in meditation, but I know that nobody is perfect. Every relationship has compromises, and I made a lot of compromises. I never liked any of the places we lived. There were a lot of things I didn't like. I didn't think he was a go-getter enough at work. I thought he was too much of a people pleaser at work. And I like a man who speaks up. Okay, but I was willing to tolerate all of that I was willing to tolerate, there are a lot of compromise you have to make in a relationship. But there are some things in a relationship that will tear it down, and that's the stonewalling and the defensiveness. And then the night I left him, there was a contemptuous statement. You'll have to read my book to read that. And that was the last straw for me. But the stonewalling is really the end, and it's called avoidant. Avoidant is an attachment style. Like I said, he's this really great guy. He has a very kind heart. He has a very kind heart. Like, we took other kids in to live with us, and he's still that man that opens his home and his heart to people. But the stonewalling, and I think he learned when I left him, because that was very painful for him. He was very, very hurt when I left him. I think that we have to do a lot of introspection. Like, I think what he learned out of our divorce was I cannot hold on to resentments. I got to deal with stuff, and I cannot neglect a relationship. And what I learned is I have to speak up when I don't like something. My feelings are valid. I have to have healthy boundaries, and I cannot be with people who don't care how I feel. That's what I learned from it. So, but again, no relationship is perfect. And in today's age, many women in my situation would never have gotten married. They would have been like, well, the sex isn't good. He's not interested in meditation. So I got to wait for the right guy to come along. And I think it was better that I got the experience of being married, because I got to have all these great kids, and I got to learn from that relationship, because there were a lot of things that came out of it. But here's the other problem. Being in a relationship with someone who's grandiose, and walled up is grandiose. Grandiose, walled up behaviors are grandiose. You can either be grandiose with too many boundaries, as like, I'm indifferent, you're not worth of talking about, I'm not going to talk about it, like stonewalling. Or if it's boundaryless, it's a controlling person or an abusive person. Like the guys leaving angry comments on my videos have a lack of boundaries and contempt. It's very slight, but they're in that quadrant. But my ex-husband was like contempt, and I'm not going to talk about it. And that is very damaging to a relationship. It would take a very unhealthy woman to deal with it. I dealt with it because he had other good qualities, and I didn't want to divorce while I had kids. And I wanted to work on my marriage. But the problem is, this is the next big point I want to make. Being in a relationship with someone who's stonewalling, you cannot grow. Okay? It's impossible to grow and develop relationship skills with a relationship with someone who wants to recycle the same negative patterns over and over and over and over. So I'm being vulnerable, and I ask for something, and he says no. Okay? So what am I supposed to do with that? Figure out a way to deal with being stonewalled. Find a coping mechanism. I can't keep growing in intimacy and connection. The whole 25 years of our marriage, I grew very little. I got a chance to grow very little in that relationship. I did have to grow quite a bit early on, because when I got mad, I would like slam the door or throw dishes a couple times, and I had to learn not to do that. So then my coping strategy just became like, okay, we're not going to talk to each other for 3 days, because he didn't want to talk about anything. And then we both didn't talk about anything. So we didn't really resolve things. And then we would start talking again as if nothing had happened. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. But if you would have asked me if I was happy I was married, I would have been like, yeah, I am happy that I'm married. So a lot of people who say that they're happily married, I wonder how happily they are married. They may not really know what's better available. But it's impossible to grow in a cycle like that. When we get upset with each other, we're not resolving it. We're not going to talk to each other for 3 days, because we're not screamers and fighters and arguers. We're just not going to talk. And then we're going to talk again. That's not healthy. And being sexually with someone who keeps saying no to intimacy, no to vulnerability, no to even looking at each other during sex. Does your partner look at you during sex, or do they keep their eyes closed? Do they kiss you, or do they avoid kissing? See? So if you're with someone who keeps their eyes closed or doesn't want to kiss, they want to have sex with you, but they're avoidant. How can you keep growing sexually? How can you keep growing emotionally? How can you keep growing? I mean, there are a lot of ways I did keep growing in my marriage, okay? Like learning things, taking care of a household. We got to build a house. We got to move different places. I helped him in his business. I did things around the house. I taught piano to the neighbor kids. I learned about finance and investing. I kept reading more about investing. I started a real estate business on the side. I mean, I could go on, but emotionally, I grew through being a mom and taking parenting classes. And I had my friends. I did some gardening, did a lot of yard work, a lot of housework, painting. Like it was, I baked my own bread. I would bring bread to the neighbors. We had exchange students living with us. I volunteered at the school. We went to like traveling soccer games. I had my kids in different activities. I taught my kids so many things. I taught them German and piano, and I mean, I could just go on. But as far as just he and I in that relationship, I didn't really get a chance to grow very much because the things I was reading about that I wanted to practice with him, he was just a no to it. Like I said, it was his upbringing that was the root cause, but it was also his unwillingness to look at anything and change. So when the guys are coming at me as like, I'm the bitchy woman who asked for the divorce, it wasn't like that. I was like, finally at the end, I was like, I'm really unhappy in this relationship. And this was during the last 3 years when we were really getting along well. And he was like seeking out my company all the time because we had gotten a lot closer after the kids were older. And I finally said, I'm really, really unhappy with the sex life we're having and the emotional intimacy we're having. Like, I really want to go to therapy. And he kept saying, no, I don't want to go. Things are fine, Sharzad. Things are fine the way they are. They're fine. And I remember one time I had to rent a car because my car was in the shop. I had to rent a car. And I was so mad at him. I went to a hotel and I called him and I said, I am not coming home until you agree to go to therapy with me. I was so mad. Like I had to go to that last straw to get his attention. Then he finally agreed to go. And in the appointment, he started naming started naming one of his resentments, which was something different, something that happened more recently in our relationship. And I was like, oh, why did he never tell me that? And then he felt better. After the therapy session, he felt a lot better. We left holding hands and we went out to dinner and we talked some more, but it didn't resolve the underlying issues that we still had because it would have needed a lot more work that he didn't want to do. And so yeah, he had a lot of anger and he had a lot of things he didn't want to deal with. And so yeah, I mean, some people could say I would have been a virtuous woman for putting up with the stonewalling and the coldness and the avoidance. That would have made me a good woman because a good woman puts up with everything. A good woman is a woman who puts up with being neglected, being stonewalled. He didn't criticize me and he wasn't defensive, but he had contempt and he stonewalled. And a good woman doesn't mind being stonewalled. That's what some of these haters on my channel are saying. A good woman doesn't mind being stonewalled. She's supposed to be kind and nurturing. She's supposed to be a doormat, a martyr and a doormat. That's what makes a good woman. A good woman is a woman who is a martyr and a doormat and has very little expectation of a man. That shows a complete lack of accountability on the part of the man. It shows a complete lack of understanding of a woman and of relationships, and a lack of accountability on the part of the man, where the man can just do whatever he wants and the woman should just stick around and be happy. That's not how it works. So I'm here to teach you, okay? And it's the 4 horsemen. It's nothing new I came up with. And I do believe that the reason that 80% of divorces are filed by women is because the majority of these divorces are filed, the majority, because the man is either abusive or an alcoholic, or he's cheating and she's tired of his cheating. Or he's avoidant, he's stonewalling, he's full of contempt, doesn't want to deal with it, he's avoiding in the relationship, he's neglecting the relationship. This goes to the workaholic men. They work all the time, so they don't pay attention to the woman. They travel a lot, they work a lot, they don't call her when they're gone, they just ignore her, neglect her, because they're avoidant. Basically, they're avoidant, emotionally avoidant. It's an attachment style. When I say avoidant, I'm not talking about, I should clarify, because some guys are like, what do you mean avoidant? You mean he didn't buy you a ring every week? He didn't take you out to dinner every night? You damn entitled bitch, you. I'm not like that. I drove old cars. We drove used cars most of our marriage. I was fine with that. Because I tend to be like more of a, he's more frugal than I am, but I was not an overspender. Later on, I was an overspender because I didn't give a shit anymore. But that was by year 15. It didn't start out that way. But anyway, you damn entitled women. When you say avoidant, you mean he didn't dote on your feet every week and lick your toes every night? When I say avoidant, I'm talking about an attachment style. I'm talking about someone who doesn't want to deal with issues, who doesn't want to discuss problems, who runs away from important conversations, who is uncomfortable with their own emotions, who doesn't even know their own emotions. See, if you're a man who doesn't allow himself to feel angry because you learned in your house, like his mom taught him and his dad, we don't do anger. We don't show anger. Anger is not okay. So whenever he started feeling angry, he suppressed it. So he didn't even know he was feeling angry. And if he doesn't know he's feeling angry, he can't tell me he's feeling angry. And if you can't be present with your own emotions, how can you be present with the emotions of your partner? Because in a good relationship, you have to be able to be present with your own emotions. I'm comfortable with my anger. And so I'm able to tell him, I notice you're angry, just as out of a compassion. I'm not going to run from that. So in order to be a competent partner in a relationship, in my opinion, we have to know our own emotions, be able to identify them and feel them, and hold space for our partner's emotions and care about their emotions and have healthy boundaries. Like, just because you're angry doesn't mean that you can hit me or lash out at me, but tell me that you're angry. Even when my kids were little, I'd be like, you can be angry at mommy. Tell me why you're angry at mommy. You can't hit mommy, but tell me why you're angry. I want to know. So I raised my kids completely differently, but I was also raised in an age where kids were to be seen and not heard. So that's where that came from. And so all of that stonewalling is very bad for a relationship. And going around with, and sometimes the neighbors would say, oh my God, I'm so afraid of your husband. He looks so angry. And I would be so surprised because he was such a sweetheart, but he was walking around with this anger. So see, when you don't express your anger, it's called the shadow. And then you're repressed, you're walking around with this angry face. But I could always calm him down. Like when he'd be upset, I'd be like, honey, it's okay. Just settle down. And he would just relax. Like I had like a good influence on him, and because I was home with the kids, I thought, well, I'm home with the kids. He doesn't have to leave work early to go to daycare or whatever. He can pursue his career. And he could stay later at work. He could go on business trips because I had the home base covered. He came home and there was a dinner ready and his clothes were picked up from the dry cleaners and I took care of the house. So there was like this nice home base, and the kids, because the kids were happy, and when daddy came home, it's like, hi dad, like we had this good family life. But when the kids were older and I turned to him to reinvigorate our relationship, we didn't reinvigorate our relationship. We started really enjoying each other a lot more, but something was off. I couldn't figure out what was off. So sometimes I would say to him, what can I do to be a better wife? And he would say, just cook more. He never said, I'm mad at you for this, I'm mad at you for that, but he was. And I didn't really like cooking, and then he would do things like by the way, so many men love going down on me, but he would be like, I don't like going down on you. I don't really like doing that. Because he hated me. He didn't want to please me sexually. He didn't want me to have orgasms. He didn't want me to have orgasms because he hated me. But he didn't know that, and I didn't know that. I kept thinking, why does he hate me so much? And he would say, I'll go down on you, but there's a 20-minute max limit. 20 minutes is all I can do. And in exchange for you going down on me, you have to make pizza. And I make this really great pizza with like semolina dough. Like, it's a huge ordeal. Semolina dough, and then, you know, I got to make the dough, and it has to rise, and then I roll it out, and I have the pizza paddle and all these toppings. Like, it makes it very messy, but it's so good. And I have to make a lot of pizzas to feed everyone. It's a big project. Or I would do that for him, and I would make lasagna from scratch. I make a really good lasagna. But again, I don't like lasagna, but I would do it for him. So I would have to make these dishes. And I would do that, but the dishes, I like to cook like Indian food and stuff he didn't like. But I didn't like that I had to make the dishes in exchange for the sex, because I would give him blowjobs. I would give him really good blowjobs, you know, and I would be like, you know, I liked having sex with him, especially the last 3 years. But the sex he gave me was very quick because he was resentful of me. That's why I want to tell you, it comes out sideways, the shadow. So I invite you to read my book, The Fuck List, or The Rewrite What I Did for Sex. And I had these bookmarks made, and on the back of the bookmark, I'm going to read this to you, okay? And this has to do with his stonewalling and his contempt. Our sex life was not satisfying. Why did my husband's love for me stop at the bedroom door? Did he secretly hate me? Was he really not that into sex, or was he withholding from me? And how could I ever be happy in our marriage when I felt so emotionally unfulfilled in our sexual relationship? And so one night I'm like, I'm not going to want you anymore. I'm done with this. And I asked him if he wanted to go to therapy to figure out if we should stay or split up. Like, I was willing to go either way. I'm like, God, should I stay or should I go? I was willing to go either way. So I took 3 months of figuring it out. I talked to my kids. I talked to my family. I talked to my friends. And then we went to therapy. And the therapist recommended individual counseling. And he said he didn't want to change a thing. That's what he said. I don't want to change a thing. I don't want to change a thing. That's what the therapist asked. Sharzad, why are you sleeping in the guest room? And I said, I'm very unhappy with our sexual relationship. And she asked him, I don't remember what she asked him exactly, like if he cared or if he wanted me back in the bedroom. But he answered in a way that was no. I don't want to change anything. And that had been our conversations the last 6 months before that. Like, I just come super quick. I don't care about sex. I just don't like to kiss. I don't know why. I don't care if you have orgasms. I don't know why. This is just how I am. I don't want to change anything. And I had to respect him for that. I had to respect him for his boundaries and for saying no. And I wasn't going to argue with him. I mean, that's what he wanted. So that's how the divorce happened. So by the time I said I want a divorce, he was very sad, but he never once said, I want to work it out. I want you to stay. He was just very, very sad because he liked the way things were. He didn't want to change. And that's the thing. Like, I wanted to keep growing. I put on my Facebook, I am leaving him to be more and to feel more. Because, see, when he kept telling me no to sex like that, he was blocking me from feeling. I wasn't even able to tell him I loved him during sex because it pissed him off. I wasn't able to play romantic music during sex because it pissed him off. And for the haters on my channel who are like, yeah, you're such a bitch, no one would ever want to do that with you. That wasn't it. He loved me. He loved me. He loved spending time with me. And we spent a lot of time together. Like, we started taking bike rides to the beach and going to coffee. It was even to when I would go to the grocery store, he'd be like, can I go with you? Because we were just close. He would massage my feet at night. We would eat dinner together. Like, we were close. But sexually, no. And I couldn't be with someone who was sexually so dismissive of me. And I know a lot of men can. That's so men might not get it. See, what men do, if men in my situation, they go out and hire an escort or get a happy ending massage or have an affair or go see a stripper, I don't know. They get their sexual needs met. But for me, it wasn't just about the sex. It was also about the emotional connection. And I was just so miserable. I was in so much pain. I was crying so much. So that's how I divorced him. That's why I divorced him. And it was this. I don't want to talk about it. I call it the donkey mode. He would be in donkey mode, like stubborn. Like, no, we're not talking about that. Not talking about that. I don't know why. That's just how I am. So, in all honesty, he left me, not that he left me, he was that way all along. But basically, he wanted the divorce before I did. If you want to be really analytical about it, he was asking for the divorce before I was by being a stonewaller and an avoidant and defensive. Not defensive, but not critical. Just contempt, So he brought it on. And by not wanting to work on things, so me asking for the divorce was just in response to his lack of wanting to work on stuff. And, I'm a woman. I want my relations to be fulfilling, or I don't want them at all. That's my truth. I want my relationships to be fulfilling, or I don't want them at all. Again, just a gentle reminder that the comment in this particular video, there will be no contempt or criticism tolerated. There will be no if you leave any comments like, of course, you women are so demanding, no man will ever want you, I'm sure your husband hated you, you're such a bitch, you're so old, anything like that, of course you're free to write it, but I will be blocking you from the channel because I feel like my vulnerability deserves no response at all, or a thank you for sharing. That's what you could say. Thank you for sharing, or saying nothing. When I left my ex-husband, I decided I will never ever again be with a man who doesn't care how I feel. And I put that into my life with women too. I won't be with people who don't care how I feel or who don't want to work on things. That's one thing I learned, is to not be with people who don't want to work on things. So anyway, I left him to be more and to feel more, and that's exactly what's happened. I've been able to keep growing. If I were still married, I would never be able to make these videos. I would have never written these books. I would have never learned all the things I've learned about relationships. I wouldn't have been able to keep growing. And because I felt very trapped, because there were all these emotions and feelings I wanted to experience and share with him. I wanted to share with him love and affection and passion. He kept saying, no, 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 Shahrazad. And I felt like this, just a second. I felt like this volcano, and you can see I'm like energetic, happy, playful woman. I felt like this volcano, and he kept pushing the lava down. That's what I mean by being trapped. He kept pushing the lava down, like, don't show me these emotions. Don't show me this. Don't do this. We're not going to talk about things. We're not going to deal with things. We're not going to handle things. We're not going to look at things. Just keep it all tucked down, Shahrazad. Keep it all tucked down. And that's not okay with me. So the lava is flowing again. Or has been since I left, because I no longer have to suppress myself to match his level of suppression. And I'm going to leave it with that. Yeah, that's right. I had to suppress myself to meet his level of comfort. And so, You know, I mean, if it was 50 years ago and I didn't have my own way of making a living, which at the time I was consulting for school districts, I would have stayed and I would have been miserable. But now that I had I had my degree, I had work going, I was building a career, and I was like, I know I'm going to be broke, I'm not going to ask him for money, but I would rather be alone than be stuck in this situation where I can't grow. So, men, you want to keep a woman in your life, you have to nurture the relationship. You have to find a good woman like me. Okay, I'm going to consider myself a good woman. And you have to nurture the relationship. Because the only woman who's going to put up with someone who's avoidant is a people pleaser. Or I don't think another avoidant, because avoidants don't attract avoidance. I think you have to be with someone who's more avoidant or a people pleaser. But I don't know. Anyway, if you have anything interesting, if you have something kind to say, or something you want to share about your own divorce or your own relationship, that's all welcome. And thank you for watching my video.